And mainland China shares were the biggest gainers in Asia today as other major stock markets in the region also advanced, with trade talks between the U.S. and China set to continue in Washington this week. The Shanghai Composite jumped around 2.68%, while the Shenzhen Composite advanced 3.705%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index also gained about 1.5%. Japan's Nikkei 225 jumped 1.82%, while the Topix also advanced 1.56%. Meanwhile, the Kospi in South Korea gained 0.67%. Australia's ASX 200 rose 0.39%. And in the U.S., stock futures indicated a mixed opening. Dow futures were up 0.01%. However, S&P 500 and Nasdaq futures were down 0.05% and 0.03% each. And away from the markets, I'm back here talking about the postponement of Nigerian elections over the weekend. Of course, that did not only come as a surprise and shock for Nigerians, but also the international community. Well, since the postponement was announced, a lot of reactions have trailed the decision as the implications cuts across. And one major aspect is what economists could call the reputation cost, which has to do with the perception of an investor who wants to come into the country to invest. Well, let's see how this development is viewed from outside our shores. Joining us now to give us a feel of what the reaction was in South Africa, which is the second largest economy after Nigeria, is an economist and data analyst in South Africa, Trinity Nkube. Hello, Trinity. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me once again.
So how did South Africans react to Nigeria's cancellation of the elections over the weekend?
Well, I must say there was shock initially, but after a while, it's something that we expect from the African region. There's been so much election, chaos from Zimbabwe to DRC to Kenya, you name it. So it comes off as a shock, but then we get used to it, and then it becomes just, calm and normal. And this side, we're also, dealing with the blackouts, the load shedding, ESCOM. It's pretty much overshadowed everything. So as much as we didn't expect that, of course, from Nigeria. However, I mean, it's something that people have started to get used to. Like, you know what, maybe this was coming.
Anyway, for you as an economist, how did you see this postponement of the election affecting planning by investors? And a lot of economists, while analyzing the costs, talked about reputation costs, which has to do with a foreign investor who wants to come in.
Absolutely. I mean, spot on. We have this issue of reputational costs. I mean, I was looking at some of the data around the actual costs. There's a bit of subjectivity there around. I mean, it's about less than 1%. But I mean, when you look at it in dollar signs, I mean, that's almost $2 billion that Nigeria lost through this postponement. However, the reputational costs, they do carry on for years to come, if not a decade, because when investors are looking at a country, they're looking at the political risks, they look at the economic risks. If you're coming to invest, you have a strategic plan. You want to know, okay, if I come in for 5 years, and then you also have an execution plan, so which means you have people on the ground. So from that point of view, I mean, it's very upsetting. I mean, I was really disappointed from my side, because we look at Nigeria as a leader, as an economic giant. And then you also have South Africa, which is following just behind Nigeria, also having some sort of chaos, I mean, around reputation, corruption. If you recall, a few weeks ago, there was even some diplomatic rows around, the 5 big, European giants calling South Africa to put its house in order in terms of dealing with corruption. Then you also have Egypt, dealing with its own geopolitical issues. So this is, in the region where all the other countries are looking to these big nations and big economies to actually put their house in order. It's very hard to see how all the other small countries are going to cope. So yeah, I was very disappointed. To put a dollar amount on the reputational costs is very difficult. However, when you go through it, you will start to see that obviously investors start to get nervous when they see these kind of movements. You don't really know, even the election itself, what's going to happen afterwards. There are all these rumors about possible rigging and so forth. So now, this is something that investors do not want to hear, even the private domestic investors.
Okay, looking at Africa generally, you talked about Nigeria and South Africa being, of course, the largest economy in Africa, and these two countries are having their general elections this year. How do you see this impacting foreign direct investment into the continent going forward?
It's not looking very good at the moment. When you look at it, you see, Nigeria at this point was a bit stable, from that front. Of course, the issues, but it was a bit stable. Now, this is more worrying because South Africa behind that are also dealing with all these corruption issues. I mean, every single day you hear about state capture. You also hear about private-public capture, where regulatory capture is the norm of the day. So when you look at Nigeria as well, you hear about corruption. Now you have this election issue. It just makes things worse and worse. I mean, on the other side of things, you also have South Africa, which have just discovered oil. Again, you have the nationalization debate. There's just a lot of nervousness around investors looking at it. Okay, if I put my money into this country, how secure is it going to be? So it's the norm, it's the institutional framework around Africa that we are dealing with, where our institutions really have a lot to work to do in terms of just giving some sort of accountability and responsibility to its people and having those positive externalities. So it's almost like the people who are corrupt are the ones that are actually rewarded in a sense. So what message are we putting towards the people that are coming into leadership positions? So it's very, very negative from an investor outlook. There's a lot of work that can be done. I'm not saying everything is all lost, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So it remains to be seen from the election process itself and after the election process for both countries. What I also see is, I mean, you have your president this side, Cyril Ramaphosa, who's obviously battling to campaign. At the same time, he has to put out fires, from these corruption circles. So it's very, very difficult on all sides.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Trinity. Trinity Nkube is an economist and data analyst in South Africa. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll look at Kenya Electricity's plan to raise funds and, of course, an update from the equities market here. Just stay with us.